Yo, what is up, drifters? Today I'm gonna be showing you guys probably the most requested video from my Discord server, which is the ultimate tuning guide for 2022, which is update 2.13.0. Just before we get into this video, I want to say that I'm going to be explaining what parts of the tune will influence your drift car. This is a video to educate you and hopefully help you make some sick tunes for whatever car you want and for whatever style. This video is not just for 90 adhesion, but for everything. So 100 adhesion all the way up to 120 adhesion, which is hella cringe. I have broken this video up into 4 parts just to space everything out to help you get a better understanding. I'm going to be breaking this up into suspension, which is influencing transitions and ride preference, grip, which influences acceleration and top speed, the engine, the brake horsepower or kilowatts, and how it influences gearing, and then obviously gearing and how final drive and the gear ratios work. Just before we start with the 4 topics, I want to answer one of the most asked questions for beginner drivers, and the question is, do body kits have an influence on the ride? The answer is no. Body kits that are lower than the original will just clip through the map. Only the stock body clips the map. This is also why I use stock bodies, so when I am tuning I can see the ride heights properly. Alright, so for the suspension, which influences transitions and ride preference, most of these factors you can tweak. They don't all have to be the same as any tune guide video. This is all depending on your preference, so please go fiddle around with a lot of these settings. You'll kind of figure out what you like. You'll probably go through lots of stages in your drift career and kind of figure out what you like. So front spring length, what does it do? It just manages the ride height. As you can hear, my car is hella low, and it's because it just looks cool this way, but in actual fact, since I have a body kit on this, it is not actually clipping the map. So let's get to spring stiffness. The spring stiffness, it influences if the car is going to be bouncy on the track or not when you hit like a bump or a pothole, which isn't actually in the game but would be pretty funny if it was inside the game. Dampener bump, this influences how the car transitions. If it transitions fast and very whippy, or if it transitions slower, and maybe sometimes if it's too low it struggles to transition, you might have to clutch kick or something like that. With the rebound, it's only influences how the car handles a bump. So if you do go over a bump with a high rebound, then the car might spin out. If it is low, then it might understeer, or if you're pro, then you'll just handle it like a man. Toe controls the stability and how soon it gets to a drift angle. I don't suggest having extremely high toe or extremely low toe. You kind of want it to be balanced out so that the car doesn't whip, because for slow style, looking at a car whip is not considered cool, dude. So we'll move now onto the caster, because camber and the roll bars don't have such a huge influence on the ride quality. The caster only influences how the wheel reacts to the controller movements. So for slow style, yeah, this is also preference. You don't have to have it at 6, where the contact patch is the same. So yeah, that's all I have to say. Ackerman angle, obviously if you're new to the game, use between 25 and 35. If you're a lot better, then use something like 68, 70. For some cars you can get all the way up to 80%. Like I said, this is just preference. Okay, let's talk about grip and its influences. So camber has obviously a tiny influence in the game. In real life, it probably has a way bigger influence. But the camber, the lower, so the more negative, the camber means the less contact your tire has with the road, which obviously decreases grip, and vice versa. For front anti-roll bar, I don't actually know how this works, but it does slightly also increase the grip. It says here moving the balance of the stiffness to the front increases the grip of the rear axis, so I guess that's how it is. Cast and Ackerman angle also have a very small influence on the speed, also something to do with the contact patch of the tire with the road. Obviously higher caster, less contact patch, higher Ackerman, um, same thing. I just want to say, for keyboard players, if you are watching this video, you'll be using Ackerman angle of 35 to 45. Just works the best with WASD. So now we're getting into the biggest influences of the grip, acceleration, and top speed. I've made a little bit of a table here of the most used tire pressures, tire profiles, rim sizes, and brake horsepower, which I'll get into a bit later, because grip also has influence on how much brake horsepower and your gearing. So for number one, we have front tire pressure of 300, rear tire pressure of 300, tire profile of 20, rim size of 16, and a brake horsepower of 350, or the lowest. This is very slow, very slippery. You don't have a lot of control. I'm pretty sure only one team uses this, and I won't be calling them out. Um, for the second one, we have a front tire pressure of 100 and a rear tire pressure of 180 with a tire profile of 20, rim size of 17, and a brake horsepower of between 400 and 500. This is the most common used for slow tunes. I'll be talking about tire width for some cars, because for some cars are faster than other cars, and how you would change the tire width to keep up with other cars. So for number 3, we have 100 and 125 tire profile, 17 to 18 rim size with 500 brake horsepower. This is again like the 300 tire pressure. Very slippery, don't have so much control, but it does look very smooth. Then we're going to get onto number 4, which is my favorite, which is the 70 and 130 tire pressures, with a tire profile of 25 and rim sizes of 18 and a brake horsepower of 600 to 700. This is quite a good combination of speed and control. I think this is probably the best tire pressures or grip settings, because I think, in my opinion, tire pressure has the biggest influence on grip. In the game, for beginners, I suggest option number 4. Option number 5, your 70 35% tire profile with rim sizes of 18 to 20 with brake horsepower of 900 to 1300 or the max. This is if you want to do this FD style 90 adhesion. This is super fast. You can't hold super big angles, not super big, like, how do I explain this? It's just very fast. So if you're watching this video to go fast, there is your base settings. So now I want to get into the front tire width. For some cars that are faster than other cars, you'll probably be using 210 on both for the 100 and 180 rear tire pressure, or if your car is slower than 225. Also, if you think you're just a little bit of a slower driver and struggle to catch up on transitions, you can increase your tire width. It won't hinder your ability for the car to slide and hold the same lines and angles as cars with lower tire width. Obviously, for the 100 and 100, you'll probably be using the same tire width as 225. For the 70 130 combo, you'll be using around 255, 250, 245 for both. For the 70-70 tire profiles, you'll be using 295 and upwards depending on the car. It's kind of like the CDS rules we get into there. Yeah, for the 300s, they ride on bicycle tires, which are 165. Yeah, those are pretty much what they use. For this tune, we are looking at the 100 and 180 because this is the most common. If you're a beginner, just hinder that to 70 and 130, very smooth, just a little bit faster. And if you and your friends are running the exact same tire pressures, you will be having a lot of fun. Now I'll be talking about front wheel track. Front wheel track just helps with the stability of the car, and you'll probably be only using this to make the car look nice, have some nice fender flares, and be low. Yeah, you don't want your tire to be running on the outside or too much on the inside. It just doesn't look cool. Tire profile also, it does the handling and performance and smoothness of the ride. Like I said in the table there, you can just go and grab those values and start tuning yourself and playing around. So yeah. Okay, now getting into the engine. This is a bit more of a complicated one. I'll be throwing again the table on the screen for a few seconds. So you can see by the table that the grip directly influences how much brake horsepower you need for the car, or to have a nice gearing. So that's pretty much it. There's some cars that don't like the rev limits at 2 max, and I always suggest the torque of the car to be on the same line as the power line. Yeah, that's about it for the engine. Just make sure it falls within the table. Another thing about the engine type also has a little bit of influence. So heavier engines like the V8, you might need a little bit more brake horsepower, but nothing too serious, like 20 to 40. And if you have some of the Japanese style engines, they are about 50 kilos lighter, according to KinoMod. So then you can have 20 to 40 brake horsepower lower, and if you're having European, it's pretty much the same weight as the Japanese cars, so just keep that in mind. Also keep in mind some of the engines don't get to high rev limits so quickly, and we kind of wanted to get to 8,000 or 7,000 RPM quite quickly. It just helps with transitions and the smoothness of the ride. So let's get into the gearing. I want to start off with the basics. The transmission type, you get standard and sequential. Sequential is just a little bit faster and standard is a bit smoother. That's all it is to it. Maybe the noise. There is a setting where you can increase or decrease the noise of sequential or standard transmission type. The diff locking ratio, basically at 1 means your diff is welded and all power goes through, and at 0.75 is not welded, and at angles you can get between 75 and 100% power output. So sometimes you need lower output to get more grip. So I recommend between 75 and 1 for your diff locking ratio. Anything else is a little bit too more grippy. Okay, let's talk about final drive. And what is final drive? Final drive determines the acceleration through the gears. So a high final drive means you'll run through the gears a lot quicker. It also means that the actual teeth of the gear are less. So we have a lot of common final drives, like 3.8, 3.9, 3.99, or 4, 420, and 440. So for the RX-7, I think it's the only car that you use a final drive of 4.4 because it's got the rotary engine and needs to go through the gears quicker. A final drive of 3.8 and 3.9 and 3.99 works well on the Japanese and Euro cars, and then a final drive of 4.10 or 4.20 normally works a lot better on the V8s. So I'm gonna be putting up a table now of also the most common gear ratios, since these are all gear ratios and that's all it means. For this BMW, I found out that to have a third slash fourth gear tune, this is the ratios that I needed with 507 brake horsepower. I could have a higher gear ratio but then lower brake horsepower and still achieve the same outcome. That's just how it works. So here is the table of the gear ratios that I use. These gear ratios can pretty much be used with nearly every single car, so just go and throw it in your car, and if it doesn't work then try one else. So yeah, talking about the brakes, it's really that simple. For slow tandems, we want a brake torque of 1000 to 1300 and a front brake bias of 81 to 83%. When you start getting into that 70 psi in the front and 70 psi in the rear, where you start going a lot faster, you want to bump it up to about 3000 brake torque. If you have a heavier car, you can even bump it up all the way to 4300 brake torque. If you're on 120 adhesion, that's kind of sus, bro, but you'll be probably using a brake torque of 5000. If you're going fast, you want to take the brake bias down. So if you are on 90 adhesion, you want to take it down to 75%, and if you're on 120 adhesion, you want to take it down to 70%. And that's what I have figured out is the best for the different adhesions. If you're running 110 in adhesion, yeah, 110, that exists. You'll also be using 75%. So yeah, that's it for the tuning guide. For Gor to say something, so I'm back. I wanted to say you can also influence the gearing with the brake horsepower. So going up will make it obviously go through the gears faster, and going down will make them go through slower. If you find that one of the gear ratios from the table that I've put up don't work, you can always mess around with it by taking it lower, which will make the gear longer, and increasing the value will make the gearing shorter. that is how it works. It's literally plug and play. You go into test drive and test drive the car. You want to test it at max angle, and hopefully you can get that spot on where you between gear 3 and gear 4, and maybe that it's viable to use in gear 2 and 3 for shorter tracks. So yeah, make it maybe also viable for gear 4 and 5 so that it's easier to use on longer tracks like East Hogue. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Yes.